this is Jamie Mankrich. Welcome to Jamie's Craft Table. Today I'm gonna show you how I made this card. It's really not a hard one, it's just a lot of different die cuts. Okay, so let's get started here. I'm going to be using soft succulent and polished pink. I'll be using the double oval punch. I have a scrap of white. I have a piece of Pansy Petals Designer Series paper, which is 2.5 by 3 5/8. I have a piece of white, which I've run through the textile embossing folder, I believe it is. I have a piece of polished pink, which is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. I have a piece of gold foil, which was 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I've die cut the center out of it for a layer. And I've got my card base, which is 5 1/2 by 8 1/2, scored and folded at 4 1/4. Here's the embossing folder that I used. And let's get the book out here so I can actually show you. Yep, Tasteful Textile. It's on page 155 right here. Okay. So out of the center of that gold piece, I have cut out this Stitch So Sweetly die. It's a scalloped rectangle. Then I have a piece of the soft succulent that I've die cut out this label from Tasteful Labels. And you could do it out of the center of this, but I just did it out of a scrap piece. I don't even know if you can see that. But I've cut this piece, and that die is from the sunflower dies. Okay, so I've got all those pieces. Let's put them over here so I know where they are. Put these away so I don't lose anything. Alright, then I'm going to be using back-to-back blooms. I'm using this one, I think this one, and that's it. This particular one doesn't have a sentiment on it. So the dies are from this sunflowers, Stitch So Sweetly dies, and Tasteful Labels. Those are the die sets. Okay. So let's go ahead and stamp our piece. And there's one other piece we're going to need. So let's do that first. I'm going to bring in my polished pink rectangle. And you want to make sure you don't go past this one, because otherwise you won't be able to use it as a layer. You want to go where you, I don't know if you can see that. You can just see it, and then you're going to pull it back and punch. This just has the tiniest little edge there, because we need this piece as our layer, but we don't want to impede in the edge that we're going to, so we can layer this on top of it. Now if you were doing it in a class, I would probably recommend having a separate piece to punch. Okay, now I'm going to take this piece, and I'm actually going to punch it first, because it, then you know what area you have to stamp in. So that's punched. It looks. Try another one. That one's better. Unless I had a rough edge on it or something. paper. Okay, so all this can go in the trash. Alright, so what we're going to do, we're going to bring in these stamps. I'm only using 2 inks. I'm using polished pink, it's soft succulent. I'm going to open the polished pink. I'm going to take this little flower. And you also need a post-it note or something to use as a... And I'm almost in the center of this. I'm going to stamp this little pink flower. And then I'm going to stamp it on my post-it note. And that's all I'm doing with the polished pink. I'm going to tear this off. I'm going to fussy cut that out. And that's just so that we can mask that a little bit. You could just set your post-it note over the top of it or do partial inking, but this isn't hard. And you don't have to be perfect. Okay. And we're going to set that over the top of that. Okay, now we're going to come in with the soft succulent ink. A little piece of scratch paper underneath, so let me put that down. And we're bringing this one. Ink that up. I'm going to stamp a stem. Okay, and I'm going to bring in this leaf one. I don't know if you can see it. And I'm going to stamp one leaf over here. One leaf over here. And then I'm going to bring in this one. I'm going to stamp one of those up here at the top. Now you could do partial inking and not ink the bottom if you don't want to do the post-it note. Okay, then remove that post-it note. And that's what we have. Okay. That's all the stamping. Okay, now we're going to bring in that pink piece that we punched. And this is going to get dimensionals on the back of it. Just need a couple. Take the backs off. Center that on the front of this. Okay. Now we're going to bring in that tasteful label. It has this nice stitching around the edge, which is nice. We're going to bring in some wet glue. You could use your runner if you wanted, but just like the wet glue. I'll center that in the center of this. And if you have problems like I do with your fingers getting in the way, use your tweezers to hold it. That's why I like the wet glue, because then I can move it a little bit. Just slid, but that's alright. Okay, then we're going to turn this over and we're going to put some dimensionals on the back of it. Okay, I'll set this aside for a second. Bring in the rest of my card pieces. Okay, let's go ahead and adhere this to the front of our card. Let me show you a trick that I find is very helpful. I'm just going to use this one because it's smaller and fits in my screen better. But your cutting board has edge like this, or your scoring board where there's a lip. So I'm going to put the card up in that lip. I'm going to put some glue on the back of this. Don't overdo it on these foil pieces because you don't want it to ooze out and get onto the foil. It's next to impossible to get off. And then you're going to slide this right into that corner too. And then it'll be perfectly lined up. Oops, I just smeared glue across the front of my foil. Okay. Now let's glue these two pieces together. I'm just putting it mostly on the edge because it has a cutout. And there's just going to be the tiniest little border. Okay, this is going to get mounted on top of this. Yay, it covers up my glue. Okay, now I need this one from the Stitch So Sweetly. Set this one aside for a minute. I'm going to mount this piece of Designer Series paper centered on this gold foil piece. Now I could have cut this out of the center of that because it's not going to show. But I just used a scrap, so. Oops, glue that onto here, centered. Glue this over the top of that. Okay, now this piece, make sure it's right side up. It's going to get centered on that. Okay, now this will go here. And what I'm going to use to adhere it is one of these bumblebee trinkets. If I can get them open. I need 3 of them. 2, 3, and a glue dots. Let's put those bumblebees on my glue dots. I'm going to stick one right over the top of that. Let's stick one over here. Let's stick one over here. I'm going to change the orientation of this one if I can. Okay, well there you go. There's the card we just made together. Here's the one I did previously. Well, thank you so much for joining me today at Jamie's Craft Table. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you can find a little bit of time to play with some stamps, ink, and paper.